Hey guys, Joe from PWC Muscle, and in this video we're going to be installing a Fizzle intercooler into our GP1800 project ski. The first step is just removing the wiring harness from the coil packs. From there we're going to disconnect our fuel and fuel rail, leaving the wiring actually attached to it. There's going to be two connectors that are on this side. See if we can get them in the video here. Can't quite see the second, but just disconnecting those two will free us for pretty much the entire rail except for the sensor on the intake manifold, and that way we can remove the whole rail, all the wiring, without having to disconnect everything individually. Okay, and you can see it moves out of the way pretty nicely. There's going to be an attachment right here. See if you can see that right there, and then another zip tie that you can snip that'll help move the full wiring harness out of the way. From here now, take off these brackets to get a little bit extra room as well. And at this point, we'd want to disconnect the air hose from the intake manifold, or from the throttle body rather. You get a lot more room to work when you don't have that fuel rail in your way.
With that hose removed, you can see that there's a bolt right here that's holding the manifold into place, part of the bracket. See if I can get it on this side as well. You'll have to remove those two bolts before proceeding.
Now we can remove the intake manifold from the engine and disconnect the wiring from the throttle body, and at this point we can just set the intake manifold aside and start to work on the intercooler. Remove the hose clamps that are holding the pipe onto the intercooler. Next we'll be removing the two hoses from the top of the intercooler. It's a little tight so I won't be able to show it, but then the intercooler mounting bolts will come next. The last mounting bolt for the intercooler is going to be this one right down there, and that's also a 14 millimeter. Alright, by rotating the intercooler a little bit, we can see the bottom hose that's connected to it, and we'll disconnect this one as well. Alright, and now we can remove the intercooler from the hull. We have two different options for how we're going to use our bushings for the mounting bracket on the left. We can either use the billet included ones that are the lower ones there, or the upper one is the OEM rubber bushing, and I'll show you how to salvage that one in the next step in case you decide to use that one. So what you want to do is just take a screwdriver, and you should be able to pop this out, and then using two screwdrivers you can get underneath the first one, push it, and then use the second. See it coming. It's probably going to fall right into the hull. Oh, I can grab it. There we go. Alright, so we're going to install the rubber bushings on our setup, but to show you how to install the billet, with the machined edge up, we're going to take this bushing, put it in, flip the whole set over. Then you're going to press on this collar. Once it's pressed on, it'll be permanently installed, so we're going to skip that step. Then you'll have a washer, and this whole setup will go on top of the OEM bottom mounting bolt, and then you can put this the acorn nut back on top. Alright, using the rubber bushing setup, we're going to have that machine side facing up, and the thicker side of the bushing also facing up. Now it'll take a second for me to press this in here, but it'll just press in, and then you'll use this bushing as well. Alright, then we press this in, and this will go right onto the lower mounting bolt that was on the engine mount, and we'll just recap it with the acorn nut on top. Alright, so next up is mounting the bracketing system to the intercooler. It will come with this bracket. Notice how one side is a little bit thicker than another. The thicker side is going to go outward. So if you notice the orientation that we have with our intercooler and the additional threaded area is going to be pointing up, and then the longer 10mm bolts will be going through it. Put a little bit of Loctite on those and just thread them on. Install the barbs onto the intercooler. We're just going to wrap some Teflon tape and then use a 7/8 wrench in order to install them into the holes. After the fittings are installed, it's important to note that the bottom fitting is going to be your inlet and the top fitting is going to be the outlet for the way that you're going to run your water. All right, now we're going to run the original cooling lines into this Y fitting. Remove the original hose clamps that were on it, and we're going to be using these hose clamps instead. They fit a lot better. So let's just slide it on and then tighten this up and do the exact same on this side with the hose clamp installed. Alright, now with the 2-foot included hose extension, attach that side to the Y, also using one of the hose clamps. Okay, after fitting the intercooler into the hull, find a spot where you can rest it up so you can see this top bracket. Now what we're going to do is install the other portion of the bracket with the 2 included screws before fitting it the rest of the way. A little bit of a tight fit, so I'll try getting it on video, but there's really only one way to install it. Be sure to use a little bit of Loctite on the bolts when you put it on. With the bracket on, we can now line it up onto the stud. Then use the supplied washer and reinstall our acorn nut. Next, we'll be installing the hose that goes from the intercooler to the throttle body. There's only one way that it will install. The smaller diameter side will be going to the throttle body, the larger diameter to the intercooler. You can use a little bit of Windex to allow it to slide more easily onto the end fitting, and then once you get it on, secure it with the hose clamp. Same thing with the throttle body side. We're going to install the cooling lines now. This is the input side, which is going to go on the lower barb, and install it using the included hose clamp. And then we can run our outlet line. This is the same one that we hooked up the Y connector to the top barb of the intercooler, and again using the supplied hose clamp. With our cooling lines installed, we can now install our blow-off valve with the included hardware. For the HKS style, there is a C-clamp that you have to use special pliers with. For the tile style, you can just use an Allen key. Alright, we're going to remove this zip tie holder in order to be able to install and tap our intake manifold for the pressure line. So in order to do that, we're going to first drill it out using a 32/64 drill bit, and then we're going to use a 1/8 NPT tap in order to create the threads, and then we'll thread on, put some Teflon tape and thread on our nipple for our reference line to the blow-off valve. Alright, be sure to empty out the intake manifold from any of the aluminum scraps that you may have cut off. So last, we're basically just going to put a little bit of Teflon tape on our nipple and just screw it into place. So now with our reference line tapped, we can install the intake manifold back onto the engine. It's a tight fit, so I didn't show it, but I reconnected the hose that goes from the intercooler to the throttle body before securing the bolts. Also reattached the wiring harness to the throttle body. Now we're going to put on our caps and put our bolts into place. We want to follow a torquing order though once we get them all on there, and the order is going to be 1, 2, under here 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, and then that last one behind there being number 8. So we want to get all of the bolts snug using our torquing order, and then from there we're going to torque them to spec, which is at 20 Newton meters. We can now hook up our reference line to the blow-off valve, and we're just going to use a couple of zip ties to secure it into place. Only a few more steps to go. Next is going to be installing the this tube that's going to connect the supercharger to the intercooler. This wider coupler side here is going to go to the intercooler, and the other tapered side is going to go to the supercharger outlet. Just secure them with the supplied hose clamps and be sure not to over tighten. The next step is going to be reinstalling the brackets that hold on the engine cover, and then putting the fuel rail and wiring harness back into place. Now install the bracket that connects to the intake manifold and that holds the fuel line in place. For the fuel line, I decided to go underneath the 180-degree tube that goes from the supercharger to the intercooler. I felt like this gave the straightest path possible and also offered the least amount of potential for rubbing, because it is pretty tight on there. So the fuel rail is now in place and clipped into the fuel line. We have the injectors pressed into, over here, pressed into their holes. And now all we have to do is tighten down the 3 bolts that hold the fuel rail on, and then we'll finish up getting all of our connectors taken care of. So these 2 connectors and then these 2 connectors need to be hooked up, and then zip tie them in place so they don't move around. Next, we're going to reconnect all of the coil packs, and then there's a couple more connectors down on this side. We have this that goes right into here, and then you want to make sure that everything gets zip tied together on that zip tie mount down there. Don't forget to reinstall this guy down here. Too tight of a fit to actually really show it on video, but that's the sensor that's on the intake manifold just below the fuel rail. So that pretty much wraps up our installation of the Fizzle Y1000 kit. You can find this product as well as others for the Yamaha GP1800 and Sea-Doos and Kawasaki's right on PWCmuscle.com, where we offer a price match guarantee, but you can always save 10% using coupon code YouTube10 at time of checkout. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to us here on YouTube. If you have any questions about this installation, please join us on our performance forums on pwcextreme.com, or you can post a comment right in the comment section on this video. In the meantime, as always, ride fast, ride safe, and we'll see you on the water.